The lot of the female worker has never been an easy one. Women have always been expected to do unskilled labour for more hours and less money than their male counterparts, and have strived time and time again to prove themselves to be capable of undertaking roles which their male colleagues believe them to be incapable of performing as well as them. Before this war to end all wars broke out, the majority of women in employment worked in textiles. Around 656,000 worked as weavers, piercers, or spinning assistants in the cotton mills, as well as in the wool and linen industries. Here, women were known to be quick and neat workers, and they did not expect such high wages as the men. The men tried to keep the skilled work, such as spinning, to themselves, and their trade unions backed them in this. Women also had jobs in the metal industry: paper milling, boots and shoes, leather, food, clothing, bookbinding, box making, lace making, and many other factory trades, but their jobs were always distinct from the men's and less well paid. Women also worked in service, where the work was hard, dirty, and often lonely. Girls as young as 14 were expected to undertake menial work for extremely long hours and meagre pay, £6 to £12 a year, with 1 day off a month. It is little wonder that women looked elsewhere for better paid or more rewarding work. But most men did not take kindly to women entering their professions and showing that they were just as capable of doing the same jobs. Around the year 1870, the brass workers, the nut and bolt makers, the chain and nail makers, and makers of all sorts of small metal goods protested loudly against the invasion of their trades by women. The men's unions, too, stood out against any organisation of women because, they argued, to organise was to recognise those outrageous women who turn at the lathe and file at the vice. When the outbreak of war against Germany came in August 1914, it brought with it a sudden and immense demand for women's labour. When the shortage of munitions became known, it was evident that unless the supply of munitions could be enormously increased, our armies would almost certainly be defeated in the field. The works had already been depleted of their hundreds and thousands of the best men, who had been called upon to serve king and country, and there was no supply of labour to fall back upon, except women. Women were already clamouring to be allowed to work in the shops, and well it was for the country that women responded so quickly to the call for their help. Women of every class poured into the works: dressmakers, milliners, teachers, musicians, artists, domestic servants, those who had worked hard all their lives, and those who had never done a stroke of work before. The danger of explosions was constantly present, and unhappily resulted many times in terrible loss of life. And then there were the air raids, sufficiently alarming to many people leading their ordinary lives in their well-screened houses. But the same spirit of enthusiasm was in the girls as it was in the splendid young men who, in the early days of the war, flocked in their thousands to the recruiting offices and put up cheerfully with every kind of rough accommodation, only to have the honour of serving their country. I wish to emphasise some of the more skilled work that women learned to do, because there is a strong tendency amongst engineers to consider that women are only capable of doing repetition work on foolproof machines. There is no doubt that many women have developed great mechanical skill and a real love of their work. The women welders also established a good reputation early in the war, and they have been steadily working on jobs interchangeable with men in a firm specialising on lathes. On mirrors, too, women have been working with great success. They back the mirrors and do a great deal of polishing and fitting. We are all familiar with the beautiful beams of light travelling over the sky in the search for Zeppelin and aircraft. And here, on the Tyne, we may feel a great pride in the mirrors and searchlights, as most of us know that Tyneside girls polished the mirrors and so added to the brilliancy of the searchlights. In the year 1916, exhibitions of women's work in engineering were held under the direction of the Ministry of Munitions and in several large industrial centres. The immense range of work they were shown to be doing must have come as a great surprise to many employers. The exhibits included aeroplane engines, gun parts, and munitions works, such as shot, shell, cartridges, fuses, grenades, and bombs. The exhibitions proved conclusively that women are able to work on almost every known operation in engineering, from the most highly skilled precision work, measured to the micrometer, down to the rougher sort of labouring jobs. Great hopes were entertained by many women that a new profession was open to them, where they could learn and earn good wages, where they could have scope for their skill and intelligence. But with the signing of the armistice, all such pleasant hopes were destroyed. The training schools were closed to women. The trade unions reminded employers of the government pledge to restore trade union rules. Of all the changes worked by the war, none has been greater than the change in status and position of women. And yet it is not so much that woman herself has changed, as that man's conception of her has changed. Yet it has been a strange perversion of women's sphere, to make them work at producing the implements of war and destruction, and to deny them the privilege of fashioning the munitions of peace. The women who work so hard to win the freedom of the world may not have freedom at home to engage in an industry where the wages are promising. It is fully acknowledged that men will not go back to pre-war conditions. They must have shorter hours, more leisure, and higher wages. But as for the women, they are merely told to go back to what they were doing before. But it will never go back to what it used to be. Women have proved themselves. They have been let out of a cage to which they never wish to return.